Does Trump have his own inflation problem now? Call it Trumpflation, and probably a better name for it. And what is the political strategy here for Dems? How should we be talking about this administration when there's so much not to like? Where do we focus the message? And are we headed for a constitutional crisis? Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
All right. Well, Jason, consumer prices rose more than expected in January, which is a pattern at this point. The Labor Department on Wednesday reported that consumer prices in January rose 3% from a year earlier, more than 2.9%, which is what the economists were expecting. I always wonder, like, who decides what the economists are expecting?
It's a 0.1% difference.
Huge.
Yeah. I mean,
that is a pickup from December. It looks like some of the drivers of this are used cars and auto insurance, which you'd know some things about at this point.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just had to. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
But it also looks like certain things like eggs. So eggs have gone up 15%, which is the largest increase since June 2015. Jason, I do remember certain JD Vance doing clips about egg prices. I also seem to remember Trump talking about inflation and making some promises. Let's go to a clip.
So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down. Starting on day one, we will end Kamala's war on American energy, and we will drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill.
Day one. What day are we on?
Definitely not one. I could tell you that much. It feels like day 1000, but
it really does. I went to the grocery store yesterday just to buy eggs, which sounds like a thing somebody would say when they're running for office, but we had the other stuff we needed. We were out of eggs, so I went to buy eggs. There were like almost no eggs, and the eggs that were there that were expensive, and they weren't the good eggs that I usually like to get. They were kind of the cheaper styrofoam container eggs, and they were really expensive. So something is going on with eggs, Ravi.
Yeah, I mean, we got to throw the bums out, I think, here. What was interesting to me is, Trump obviously took full responsibility for this and took a hard look in the mirror and said, you know what, I need to do better. Let's actually throw up this truth that he threw out there. He basically blamed it on Biden. He said Biden inflation up. So he's trying to pin this on Biden, which is totally predictable. The question is, how long will he try this / get away with it? Unclear whether he's actually getting away with it now, but my sense is he'll probably be doing this till the lights go out and he is forcibly removed at the end of his term. But
to be fair, there's a period by which, like, I don't know that you can blame it on Biden, but there's a period in which it is hard to blame it on Trump. However, I mean, in normal circumstances, I would say, yeah, whatever is going on with the economy, in February of a new administration is probably more attributable to the policies of the last administration, except when the first thing that happened after you won the election is you told everybody you were going to put huge tariffs on everything. And then you came in and you started putting huge tariffs on everything. It does kind of make it seem like, maybe your tariffs, maybe the price increases are anticipated by the producers, by the sellers, and they're building the price increases in because they're expecting to pay more with the tariffs.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that they extended none of that grace to Biden, which means, like, it's the question, do we always play by a different set of rules? Do I think, or do I have any sense whatsoever that these particular price increases are tied to any policies of Trump? No. Do I care at this point politically? No.
I mean, he said he was going to bring prices down on day one, and he's clearly not done that.
And the thing is, like, if he brings them down on day 100, nobody will remember this. So the question is, what's the trajectory, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the relevance of all of this is that he's in the hot seat right now. And I think we've talked about on this podcast that the only check on Trump is going to be the market at this point. Like, it seems very clear to me that there's, as we were talking about last week, and we'll talk about more later in this podcast, that traditional checks on Trump's power and the politics that would come if he had to run again are not there. And one of the most effective sort of ways that we can cool him down, slow him down, is if he's has to, worry about his ego and the Trump economy and the Trump stock market and inflation and all these kinds of things. And this is really dangerous for him because, as you said, regardless of what's driving these particular price increases, he's done a lot of things that seem predictably likely to increase prices in the future. And if he's already dealing with a trend towards higher inflation and he makes it worse, I can't imagine the American people are going to be happy about that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to keep in mind that an additional argument about this, like a hat on a hat, if you will, is that you've got a lot of people believing that the price in eggs going up has to do with bird flu, a bird flu outbreak. Well, okay, he's slashing through DOGE all sorts of civil service positions, including those that regulate outbreaks like bird flu, that do inspections to keep that kind of thing from happening, keep that kind of thing from spreading. So you can expect more of this sort of thing in the future as well.
Totally. Well, one clip I really enjoyed was a segment on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo. Let's go to this clip.
Egg prices are soaring. Last week, the average wholesale price for large white shell eggs reached $8 for a dozen. This is wholesale. Retail, it's higher than this. The previous all-time wholesale price was $5.46 back in December 2022. How much are eggs retail right now?
Right now, probably $11, $12, $13, $14. Which ones you want? Brown eggs, you want free-range eggs, et cetera, But they're in the low teens right now.
I've never seen anything like that. Well, $14 for a dozen eggs.
They're killing the chickens.
Yeah.
And
because of bird flu, right?
Because of bird flu. Now, let's ask the $64 trillion question. Is this another COVID crisis to greet President Trump?
Wow.
And we don't know that.
I'm getting anxiety already.
You just stuck your finger in it. Tell us.
January 25th.
So, I mean, what I don't understand. Are they ascribing it to?
Here's my read on this. They're grasping for things outside of Trump's control that they can blame on these coming price increases. That was my read on this.
It makes sense. I mean, Trump's name not going to come up other than, is he a victim of this?
Yeah, has to
Prices are going up. Why are people doing this to President Trump?
Here's the thing. Our audience at this point should know that I have not been going out of my way to deliver positive or optimistic news about anything. And certainly prices going up is not anything great. We want prices to go down regardless of the politics. That being said, the one thing that is a mortal threat to this entire MAGA project is the economy and particularly inflation. That if the inflation, which again, we are not rooting for high inflation, everybody listening to this podcast, and me and you included, would have to pay those higher prices. Mm-hmm. But if they don't fix this and get this trajectory right, nothing is going to stick beyond this, and they will be blamed. And it will do irreparable damage to their entire project. And that doesn't get to any of the other risks involved in this administration, which there are many. But this is the biggest risk, in my opinion, to their entire project. And I don't get the sense that they're thinking about it clearly. Because then they wouldn't be, they're implementing tariffs in the very week that this data is coming out. And if they don't get the message quickly that their immigration and tariff policies are going to cause them trouble here, I don't know, man. I can't imagine even an American public that hasn't been as, responsive to the threats of Trump as we would like them to be. I can't imagine that they will be, they'll go along with this.
Yeah. So let's break this down as to why this is, right? First of all, it is important to remember that cultural battles, which is really the stock and trade of Trump, right? Anti-wokeness, just the general, the message aimed at men that the Democratic Party doesn't care about you, affirmative action, you name it, all these cultural battles that they want to wage and that they use to pick off voters that are not in their traditional constituency. Those cultural battles are a political luxury for voters, and they are a political luxury that voters only access when they feel like they can, and they only feel like they can access those when the economy is not their primary concern, right? So if you look at the last election, the economy was their primary concern. And yes, they waged a lot of stuff on cultural battles, but so did we. I mean, if you're being real about it, right? Like
sure.
we talked a lot about abortion. We talked a lot about the assault on democracy. These are all, we may see them as anything but luxuries, but that's not how voters see them. Voters see them as political luxuries, and they engage with them when the economy is not their chief concern. But once you're president, the script gets flipped, right? Now Trump owns the economy. So he wants to make everything about cultural battles. I mean, how many different executive orders or proclamations can you make about anti-wokeness or certainly about trans rights? I mean, there's just not that many trans people in the United States proportionate to the amount of trans policy that they've tried to put out, because they want to wage these cultural battles, and they think that they can win on these cultural battles. But yes, you're right. They are confronted with the fact that they have those cultural battles they believe will win them working class voters. But they're confronted with the fact that their economic policies, which they inherit from the institutional Republican thinking of supply side economics and pro corporate everything, whether they talk about it that way or not, those are actually pretty unpopular. And they have a tendency to do things like raise prices. They have a tendency to do things like cause layoffs and cause recessions. And so that's where they're playing with fire. They're trying to balance two things. They want to win on the cultural battles, but the only way they can make real headway on the cultural battles is if people are not immediately concerned about the economy.
Yeah, I think that is the big risk here. And I think I don't want to underestimate how powerful their media ecosystem is in convincing their own people that either something isn't true or that the opposite is true in crime, or that they just
don't have to convince people the economy is great when it's bad. They just have to convince people it's not their fault and that it's someone else's fault.
So that is a battle. The other thing here, the other big risk, which will be a recurring theme of this podcast for a while, is just when you got the federal government, you're now on the hook for results. So if people are waiting too long in TSA lines, they're not getting their tax refunds. They're not getting their VA doctor quits.
Right.
These are the kinds of things that you're gonna have to explain to your people. And it's not like that automatically means that the reality wins out. It just means that is an important moment for Democrats to step in and talk about what's going on and who's responsible.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're talking about there are assigning blame and this concept of customer service in government, right? Which are two separate things. But the assigning blame part goes back to the crossover between the cultural battles and the economy, right? Because what is the Trump central message on the economy at the end of the day? It is a cultural argument. And his argument is that the reason that the economy is hurting is because we have too many people here who we need to deport, right? That's
Right.
At the end of the day. And it's like I've said for a long time, there's two kinds of populism. There's left-wing populism, which blames rich people, and there's right-wing populism, which blames brown and black people. And so that's his economic argument. So what happens in a year when he's trying to declare some sort of victory on the immigration thing because he's deported a ton of people and set up a concentration camp in Gitmo and stuff like that? Who does he then blame? I'm sure he will continue to try to blame immigration and migrants on the economy, which doesn't make any economic sense, but he's going to try. But that's very hard to do while also saying that you are making progress in the cultural battle that is your primary cultural battle that you like talking about. And then on top of that, yeah, the customer service issue is a real issue. People have come to expect a certain level of service in all of their interactions at this point, and they are increasingly holding government to that standard. And when you cut government extensively because you have this inherited Republican belief that government is not important, you're going to have a really hard time giving decent service to people.
Well, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about some of these confirmations that we've seen. Today, Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed. It looks like Mitch McConnell was the only person to vote against her, which tells you a lot about where we are right now, whereas he's the most sensible member of the
Senator
right.
YOLO.
Yeah. Let's go to a clip of Adam Schiff talking about the risk of Gabbard before the confirmation.
Make no mistake, Ms. Gabbard is entitled to her own personal opinions. She can apologize for Assad or Putin or any other murderous dictator to her heart's content. But we're not considering Ms. Gabbard for some position in which her bizarre fondness for foreign despots is beside the point. She is not the nominee for Postmaster General. We're considering her for one of the most important jobs in our intelligence community. And for that, Tulsi Gabbard is a walking 5-alarm fire and must be rejected, must be.
Man, there are so many different ways why she is a dangerous pick. I mean, you could just draw them out of a hat. I mean, off the top of my head, there's just the fact that she doesn't believe U.S. intelligence. There's the fact that she will potentially direct and misuse U.S. intelligence. But I think of all of them, it is a tie for me between the possibility that she shares U.S. intelligence that she's not supposed to share with our adversaries or enemies. And then right next to that is the Five Eyes problem. The Five Eyes problem, which people who have not worked in the intelligence world, or I'm sure you dealt with or handled this sort of stuff when you were at the UN, there's Five Eyes. There's New Zealand, there's Canada, there's Great Britain, there's the United States, let's see, New Zealand, and Australia. Those are the Five Eyes, meaning those are the 5 sets of eyes that are in large part at the secret level and sometimes at the top secret level treated almost as one government, so that intelligence obtained by Great Britain can be shared with, there's a process, but with a very minimal process with the other 4 nations and vice versa across. If you, and that's, by the way, I can speak from experience, typically very good and very useful and important and often actionable intelligence. There is a real threat that when the director of national intelligence is a concern as to their ability to keep things secret and whether things stay with them, whether we are functionally still a member of the Five Eyes, meaning that Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand will not be able to share crucial intelligence with us because they can't share it with Tulsi Gabbard. That's
Right.
a huge honking deal.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're being honest, the same would be true of Trump himself based
Yeah.
on his record of misusing classified information. And this is no small deal because there are people out there who compromise their security and who, if we mishandle this information, their security is compromised. And of all the sort of back and forths that concerned me was that she refused to condemn Assange and Snowden, who basically, people can think what they want about Snowden, but if you're the director of national intelligence, your job is to safeguard intelligence in the United States. And what Snowden essentially did was take the entire metaphorical hard drive of intelligence of the US and dump it onto the internet. And it's one thing if you're a Nation columnist or at The Intercept. It's another thing if you're the director of national intelligence. I kind of want you to take seriously threats to that. And she doesn't.
Let me tell you something. I agree. You can think what you want about Snowden, but there is a right and a wrong on Snowden.
Yeah, you and I are aligned on this. I think it was wrong, but I'm saying even if you, listener, are like, a guy kind of had a point. That's not my position. I mean, that's certainly not what you want out of your director of national intelligence. Yeah.
But he also is a criminal who betrayed the country and, signed all the same stuff I signed and then didn't keep his word. And that's one of her heroes. And she's now in charge of intelligence.
It gets to like the Luigi conversation that we had that some people had a hard time with, which is you always got to take these things and say, well, if this was the rule that everybody applied in their life, would society be able to function?
Right.
And the answer is no. In that case, assassinating people who work for the healthcare industry, which is millions and millions of people in this country, if everybody behaved that way, we'd be in real trouble. if everybody who has a clearance decides that they're gonna like become activists for whatever pet cause that they have, or make a statement about the U.S. government or about secrecy or whatever, we'd have no secrets. And I kind of like having secrets. I'm not sure I want foreign adversaries knowing all of our vulnerabilities and all of our assets around the country, who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. I'm pretty sure I want that that information carefully guarded.
And we have a long history of having a process for choosing who gets access to those secrets. Every major unit in the military, every major unit in the intelligence structure has what's called an SSO. It's a I think a special security officer, and their job is literally to investigate whether everybody within their sort of jurisdiction should be able to keep their clearance. And I can tell you that, I think she's still in the reserve, Tulsi Gabbard. She is, I believe, at least came up as a military police officer. I'm not sure what her branch is now. I know it's not intelligence. If Tulsi Gabbard, in her military like reserve capacity, were to apply for a higher than secret clearance, given the issues that she has had, first of all, I'm not sure that they would let her keep her secret clearance. But if she were to go for a top secret or a top secret SCI, there is no way her local SSO would give it to her. And now she is the director of U.S. intelligence.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, another guy who wouldn't pass a normal background check is Kash Patel. We've talked about him before. Senator Durbin just accused Kash Patel of secretly orchestrating the firings of FBI officials. And this is a day after Patel told the committee under oath that he was not aware of any of these plans. And so this seems important because it seems lying under oath is a crime, and certainly would be worthy of rejecting a nomination.
Yeah, we talked about this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I said I was being optimistic, but I did not think Patel was going to get through. Now that Tulsi Gabbard has gotten through and only Mitch McConnell opposed her, I will be shocked if Kash Patel does not get through, particularly because this is where, I feel like Trump would have been willing to punt Tulsi Gabbard and it wouldn't have even bothered him that much. And they still let him have Tulsi Gabbard. I don't think Trump is going to be easily stepping away from Kash Patel. There are these retribution positions where Trump actually wants to do the job. You saw where he appointed himself the head of the Kennedy Center honors because that's a thing he cares about. Well, he cares about DOJ. He cares about FBI, right? He cares about these, and he cares about DOD. Those are the places where he's going to put somebody who's really just going to do whatever he tells them to do and let him do that job in addition to president. And that's what Kash Patel is. So he feels very strongly, I'm sure, about Kash Patel being in that position. And that's why, unfortunately, I will be shocked if he doesn't make it the rest of the way.
Yeah, and we should keep trying on this one, because the longer it takes, Trump will replace Patel with somebody else who's going to do his bidding. But I think the more we could slow them down, just the less time they have to do damage, even if it's by a couple of weeks. And I don't know, did you follow the saga of the acting FBI director? Are you familiar with what happened here?
No.
So from what I understand, the Trump transition / administration made a mistake and sent out the wrong release naming Driscoll the acting head of the FBI, but because they didn't want to embarrass themselves, they've just left him in place. And Driscoll has been leading a resistance within the FBI, rallying the FBI faithful to be like strong stewards and say strong to the mission of the FBI and fight any politicization of the FBI. And he's the current acting head. Now, he will not last. They will fire him soon. I'm surprised they haven't done it already. But that's what we have right now. So my thing is, like, let's do everything possible to kill Patel. And the thing is, like, kill his nomination, to be clear. The Collins and Murkowski, I'm just confused by here. Like, now, even with those votes and McConnell, which
shocking that Murkowski, Collins, whatever. I've given up hope on Collins.
She's very concerned.
Spine. Yeah, having more than concerns. I don't have a lot of hope. I'm really, I mean, the only thing I can think is that Murkowski is trying to, sort of keep her powder dry for certain, her political capital for, she can't go in on all of them because at some point she becomes a pariah. But, and if she opposes Patel, then maybe that's the case. But it is odd.
I think the key differentiator here is like the people who show spine. There are not many of them, and what it means to show spine is, an interesting question. But you have to have decided you're not going to run for re-election. That's like a precondition.
Yeah,
it's not sufficient, but it's definitely necessary. It really also helps if you decide not to become a lobbyist, right? So if you're like, hey, I'm just out, like McConnell is probably like, I'm going to like sip bourbon on my front porch after this, then that really helps.
You have to be truly YOLO. You have to be old.
Yeah.
And let's be frank, not that far from leaving this mortal coil through natural causes. And so what do you got to lose? Nothing. And that's McConnell now. It was not so much Romney because, Romney seems like he's going to be around for a while, but certainly he had given up on political aliveness.
Yeah.
There's
a saying in the NFL combine called the relative athletic score, RAS. And this is like, to me, is like the relative courage score. The RCS is what I give for Republicans. Romney very high on the RCS scale. And it's relative, right? It's not like, we're not talking about Navalny level courage here, but this is
that's
as good as we get. Well, okay. Before we take a break, I want to do a quick public service announcement for this group called Squadra. You've been a part of it in previous seasons. Basically, every year I do this group where it started as this informal thing that we were all part of, where we were doing workouts together. It's kind of like Color Wars for Fitness, where a bunch of my friends and now a more extended group, including listeners to this podcast, track workouts, healthy habits, etc. And it's a friendly competition. We make it fun. And we've been professionalizing it every year. Last year, we built a basic app, and we have a lot of rituals and routines and teams. And we're about to launch our new season. And so if folks are interested, they've got about a week or two. If they want to sign up, you can go to joinsquadra.com. That's SQUADRA. I think I got that right. Joinsquadra.com, which is the Italian word for team. You can check that out. You could apply. It's very affordable. It's like $29 a month. And for folks who can't afford it, if you just shoot me an email saying you can't afford it, you could be in the program for free. All we ask is that you take your health and fitness seriously. We've had some people who are totally new to their fitness journeys, who've never lifted a weight before in their lives. And then we've had people like our friend JD Shilton, who are professional athletes who've done this before. So it's that wide of a spectrum. What everybody brings to the table is just a commitment to do the very best they can and take control of their health. So check it out, joinsquadra.com. We'd love to have you. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna fully endorse. I mean, it was a huge help to me, and now I work with a trainer now that's baseball specific stuff, but it is like having both a trainer and a fitness group at the same time. And I think people. So yeah, I fully endorse. People should do it.
Well, with that, let's take a break. February's here, and whether you're beating the winter blues or just need a little extra spark, microdosing could be the perfect way to level up your routine. Forget the heavy highs, stay focused, energized, and in control with just the right amount of boost. This year, Vaya is here to support you in your journey to become your best self. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, Vaya is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. From setting the mood into the bedroom to chilling out after a long day, Vaya has something for you. Their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies offer the perfect microdose to help you feel just right without ever slowing you down. Forget about blocking off hours for the heavy high. With Vaya, you get all the benefits of hemp in a precise, easy microdose that gives you a boost without compromising your responsibilities. A little lift all day long. And the best part is Vaya legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. No medical card required. So if you're 21 plus, check out our link in Vaya's website link in our description and use the code MAJORITY for 15% off. And if you're new to Vaya, get a free gift of your choice. I take these with me whenever I'm on the road, like I am right now. And it's a healthy alternative to drinking alcohol, for instance, and then sometimes even using stimulants like coffee. So try Via and experience the full spectrum of benefits, microdosed and perfectly balanced. If you're 21 plus, check out our link to Via in the description. Use the code majority to receive 15% off. And if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice after you purchase. They ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you this year. Enhance your everyday with Via. Well, Jason, the big question about where Democrats should spend their time and what their message should be is a really difficult one, given the flood the zone approach from Republicans that we talked about last week. One theory is that Elon Musk, both because of the power he has and because of his unprecedented unpopularity, is a great target for Democrats. He is, depending on which poll you read, either -11, -12 in approval. Trump is doing much better. I wouldn't say great, but he's much more popular with the American public, and Trump is not running again. And so you can kind of define whoever you want in this administration and make them unpopular. And in some ways, given the relative ages of these two people and the amount of resources and chutzpah that Musk has, it's probably really important to continue to define him over time. And he's probably a greater long-term threat in some ways than Trump is moving forward. And you could walk and chew gum at the same time. You can attack them both, but you obviously have limited time and resources. And it seems like Democrats have really settled on a combination of Musk, DOGE, Project 2025 as their target. And just as one example of this, here's Representative Cesar at a government oversight hearing.
5 inspector generals that were looking into Elon Musk's companies were fired by the Trump-Musk administration. These inspector generals, who are independent, protected by law, they are the people that find the waste, fraud, and abuse and found many of the cases of waste, fraud, and abuse that have been brought up today, fired because they were looking into Elon Musk. At the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to protect workers from getting their unions busted by folks like Elon Musk, made functionally broken by the so-called Department of Government Efficiency that really is the Department of Government Efficiency for Elon Musk, not for you. They are trying to shut down the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. You know what Elon Musk doesn't seem to be looking into? His own contracts. Again, I'll ask you, Mr. Talcove, do you know how much money a day Mr. Musk will receive from the federal government for his contracts? No. The answer is $8 million a day. Just last year, Elon Musk was promised $3 billion from close to 100 contracts with the federal government. Ms. Royal, do you know how much the average person in this country who survives on Social Security, one of our seniors who's worked their entire life, about how much they have to survive on a day?
I do not.
$65 a day. We're not looking into Elon Musk's $8 million a day. This subcommittee, chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the House Republicans, is looking into your grandmother's $65 a day.
Yeah, man, that's the first time I've seen him.
Yeah, I didn't even know who he was, honestly, until this clip.
It's impressive framing. I think you're absolutely right that, look, Trump is presumably either through, the term or whatever, going to fade back, and they're going to be put in a position, probably not so much in these midterms next year, but somewhat, but definitely by 28, of figuring out who their party is without him, or at least who it is without him leading it. And that means we have a moment where we get to choose who we say leads it. Not to mention the fact that essentially Musk is the heir apparent. The only reason, think about it. If Musk could run for president, is there any doubt that he would be running for president in 28?
Yeah.
No, he 100% would be, right? So he is absolutely going to have the expectation of maintaining this position of the power behind the throne in the next administration, which means whoever is in that primary is going to have to also win the Musk primary. So you may as well start hanging it over their head. He is already unpopular. He is, in my mind, nowhere near sufficiently unpopular for what the opportunity is to message around him. I mean, like, step back from, what we're dealing with on a day-to-day. Step back from the fact that there are plenty of podcast bros on the right who want to be Elon Musk and have this idea that he's some sort of picture of masculinity, and they've created this fiction around it. Step back from that for a minute and remember that most Americans don't live in one bubble or the other, right? They're mostly operating in the real world, or at least in multiple bubbles, so that there are different ways to get through to them. And just use the logic that the richest man in the world is standing in the Oval Office and quite clearly giving the president direction and manipulating the United States government in such a way to further enrich himself. It's like the most obvious message you can possibly imagine. And so obviously we should lean into it. And, there are people who feel like, but do you want to mess with Musk while he runs this communication technology or that one? There's no situation under which he's going to exercise any sort of mercy for anything. So you have to go directly at it. You have to, I mean, the stuff is so obvious. Like, they're completely dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which means you can take absolutely every corporate fraud, absolutely every piece of corporate greed that happens over the next few years, and quite credibly and truthfully hang it around their neck politically. I mean,
and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Oh
I mean,
my
it's
God.
just they're removing the Inspectors General, Foreign Corrupt Practice Act, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I mean, they're very much explicitly leaning into their corruption here, and that is a huge vulnerability. And I agree. I think Musk is just more vulnerable generally. He's also, like I said, more durable, and the energy is really weird. There was this press conference with Trump and Musk in the Oval Office, and we're going to play a couple clips from it, and we'll try to narrate it for the audience over audio because the way it looks is very interesting. But let's go to the first clip here.
Detractors, Mr. Musk.
I have to what?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House, we won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that.
Ravi, it just occurred to me what the biggest Achilles heel that the Republicans have when it comes to Musk right now. And that is that the Republicans have a long-term interest in maintaining power. Musk has a short-term interest in getting everything he possibly can for himself right now. And those interests are not aligned.
Yeah. Well, maybe worth mentioning to the audio audience just what that looked like, which is essentially like Musk standing next to Trump, who's sitting in the Resolute desk or whatever we call it in the Oval Office. Trump just looks kind of like
placid.
Yeah, while Musk is the one who's holding court and is unquestionably the more interesting figure in the room to the press. I'm not one of these people who's like, there's an inevitable breakup between Trump and Musk. I actually don't know because they have such shared interests. But it is unquestionably true that Trump doesn't put up with being upstaged. So it'll be fascinating to see how this goes moving forward.
Yeah, and but the interesting thing, their interests are very aligned because Trump also doesn't care what happens to Republicans in the long term.
Right.
That's why those two men are very aligned. Trump's getting what he wanted. He gets to exact retribution against the people he wanted to. He's going to get, he's going to build his personal wealth empire more. He thinks he's going to do it in Gaza, for instance. He's going to do those things. And he gets to stay out of prison. Those are the main things that he wanted out of this presidency, and he's going to get them. What Musk wants is he wants to completely ransack all the parts of the government that could stop him from doing the things he wants to do. He wants to permanently weaken government. So he will have some residual interest, and not to mention, frankly, an addiction to power, for why he will want to continue into the next election and the next, presidency. But he is playing with house money, whereas the people who want to be the next president, the people who want to get reelected to the Senate, they're not playing with house money, and their interests are not aligned with Musk's. So Musk can stand there and say, we have a mandate to do all of this stuff, when obviously they didn't even get the majority of voters, right? They got more voters than Biden. They didn't get the majority of voters. And it was a pretty close election, right? So that's obviously misinformation and propaganda that they're putting out. But if you govern like you have that overwhelming majority and do a bunch of stuff that you quite literally disavowed during the election, you disavowed Project 2025.
Yeah.
And then you put Project 2025 into execution. You do the whole playbook. Well, that's a really good way to not get reelected. And the most important word we've used here is corruption, because that is something that voters inherently understand. And when you want something that is going to cut across all the possible issues as a truthful explanation as to why things are happening, when we go into an economic dip, when we have things that are done, when the videos start to come out of the way people are treated in Gitmo and those sort of places, and you get people who were like okay with that, so they voted for Trump, but it wasn't one of their animating reasons, that's going to pull them off. All that stuff. And when you layer corruption in as an explanation, you look at any country in the world, any government in the world, and if you can make in a free election, if you can make a valid argument about corruption and combine it with economic downturn of any kind, which we're not rooting for, but we just think that's what's going to happen given their policies, it's a very effective argument.
Well, Musk was asked about the possibility or reality of corruption during this press conference. Let's go to this clip.
If you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is that a conflict of interest?
And are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was.
The president said the other day.
Well, I think there are a few things going on here. Obviously, it's worth pointing out that SpaceX is a company that he controls. So he's I don't know what it is, controlling interest, majority shareholder, whatever. But he's got preferred stock and controls that company. So he's being squirrely here, just like he was when he retreated to generalities in the previous clip, where he was like, people voted for government reform, right? He uses the generalities because the specifics are not flattering to him. But this is an area where we need to be careful, because if you track the way that people are talking about the DOGE efforts on the ground, and I think the USAID conversation is one where, depending on what bubble you're in, it lands very differently, right? And I think this is a case where the theory and the practice are very different, right? The theory that the Pentagon is wasting a ton of money, 100% sound, right?
Sure.
Total reality. And we got to make sure that when opposing Musk and his efforts, we focus on the way he's going about it, not the theory behind cutting government waste. And that is a difficult needle to thread, because I think as we watch the USAID conversations, I think a lot of people, like, if you're not following closely, you might not realize that they're weaponizing like anecdotes one after another of taxpayer money that is really hard to justify in a coffee in Kansas City with your sort of independent friend, right? And I think the way I like to go about this is to be like, look, like, I got no problem with cutting waste, and there's been all kinds of efforts over time, Cass Sunstein under Obama, for example, to try to cut waste. In theory, this is no problem. The problem is the way you're going about it, like a blanket freeze on all government payments that had to be rescinded, shutting down entire agencies, having a guy with clear conflicts of interests presiding over it in a chaotic fashion, furloughing or, giving a vague direction to government employees, including VA doctors, that they can quit within 6 months. These are not the actions of people who are organized and thoughtful. And you depend upon a lot of these government agencies for basic services, and they're going to cause more damage than they're going to do good. That's my party line on this.
And government is not the same as business. It's just
Right.
not the same. You can take over, they use the term hostile takeover. You can take over a company. You can be a corporate raider, and you can make money for the shareholders by firing all sorts of people, by getting rid of all sorts of functions, by stripping the company down to its parts. But that doesn't mean that the company is going to be more effective at meeting its mission for customers. Now, when all you're trying to do is make money, you may not care. But that's not the job of government. The job of government is to be as effective as possible for meeting the mission of its customers, which is all of us. So when you treat it like it's a stripped down, private equity buys it, take its parts, and like he says in the Chiron there in that last clip, that there are good components at USAID that can be hung on to. Okay, but that's a private equity approach to this, right? That's a corporate raider approach to this, and that's not how you run government. By the way, in that last clip, one thing we should mention in the description is I don't know how many kids Musk has, and I don't know how many he talks to, but one of the ones he talks to is on his shoulders during the clip, which is very thoughtful propagandizing, right? If you're going to go out there and you're going to talk about all these devastating cuts and the way that you're hurting people and your potential corruption, not potential, your clear corruption and conflict of interest, why not have your kid climbing around on your shoulders? It's certainly very softening. So, I mean, they're smart about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've been inundated with memes of Musk sleeping on the floor of the Eisenhower building. A lot of my sort of Trump-leaning friends are sharing that, say, if the richest guy in the world is willing to sleep on the floor to save you money, then yada, yada, yada. That's the message they have. And take it seriously. That is an effective meme for certain people. That's what we're battling against.
Every time not with, well, it's unfair what he's doing. He's cutting people's jobs. It is unfair, but that's not what's going to convince people. It's the richest man in the world is sleeping on the floor because he wants to be richer. And it's why they asked Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. That's why he's there. It's how he makes money.
Yeah. The way I like to put it is two things. He wants to be richer, and he's addicted to attention. Yeah. And that's what's going on there. If you're sleeping on the floor and trying to do hustle for, we all have that coworker who is constantly reminding everybody how hard they work. And you just need to remind your friends that that's what's going on here. Is anybody who's performative like that should not be trusted.
We had a term in the Army that we particularly used when I was a trainer for officer candidate school. And it's a term for the soldier who was not all that helpful to, the other guys or gals in the squad or in the platoon, except when the instructor or the evaluator, the training officer was around, right? They became extremely visibly interested in the team. And the term was Spotlight Ranger. And that's what Musk is in that environment. He's a Spotlight Ranger,
Yeah. Well, okay. One more story here. JD Vance, made some news this week with a tweet in which he said, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general and how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. This is not the first time Vance said something like this in 2021. He basically said that Trump should pull an Andrew Jackson. The Chief Justice made his ruling, let them enforce it. Musk jumped into the fray and basically said the same things. A lot of people are talking about whether this is the beginning of a constitutional crisis in which the administration is signaling that they want to ignore court orders, which at least one judge has accused him of this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it particularly with Musk, it just reminds me of somebody who clearly Musk has not, with the exception of winning contracts, has not had a great interest in government over the years, right? And now he's confronted with this idea of separation of powers and that a judge can overrule unconstitutional or illegal actions, and he's aghast. And he's like, well, obviously this shouldn't be allowed to happen. And let's think about what it is that this judge is actually overruling, that Musk is calling for them to be impeached, right? It's what, that he's not allowing them to freeze Treasury, to get into the access to Treasury Department data is what it is, right? Now, like, of all the things that the Trump administration is doing, gaining access to Trump or to Treasury data is probably, it's bad. It's real bad, but it's not like it is crucial to all of the policy goals that they have, right? But it conflicts with what Musk wants. So Musk just takes it to a 10 immediately with, this judge has to be impeached. And it's like, hey man, you're new here. This is what happens. Executive makes decisions. The judiciary sometimes says, no, that's outside the bounds. He doesn't care, right? Because he just has always believed that none of the rules apply to him. But like, that's jumping off the handle. And it makes you wonder, going back to the messaging of it, why does he need access to this data so badly? It really seems,
it's hard to know exactly what's going on, right? It's like, well, what are these people doing? It's a group of mostly young sort of sycophants running around, and again, they're theoretically, the idea that you're trying to root out waste, there is a version of that is a natural extension of rhetoric that we come to expect from Republicans, and is not on the face of it necessarily bad. What is necessarily bad is that the people carrying this out have shown a thirst for vengeance, a level of sloppy work, a real appetite for conflicts of interests, like a tolerance for it, and in some cases a excitement for leaning into their very conflicts of interest.
They are substituting it for expertise.
Yeah, and a just huge politicization, right? Like, you just come to expect. It is a guarantee that people like the Meidas Network are going to be audited. Like, it's just like, it's just, we know it's coming, and you know what their line is going to be. It's going to be like, you politicize the IRS because they made up a scandal about politicization in the IRS, and now it's equivalent, which obviously the natural thing to say is like, even if you were right, which you totally made up that scandal, but like, even if you're right, that was politicization, you said it was wrong then, but now all of a sudden you're doing it times 20. Like, but this is the world we live in. It's like, we've talked about this over the years. It's honestly like the worst toddler like you've ever experienced, but now with tremendous power over your life. And it's really maddening, and it's hard to stay sane in the face of stuff like this.
Ravi, I don't know how a constitutional crisis polls. I think we're going to find out. But I tend to think that it is the kind of uncertainty and instability that two groups are going to not like very much. One is voters, and the other is the market.
Yeah.
And I think if they truly enter into a constitutional crisis, they are going to have problems with both. Now, that's not a real saving grace, but it is something to keep an eye on, and it is a reason to continue to highlight this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's enough bad news for 1 week, Jason.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about a good news or a fun escape show that we're doing, and we can tell people about it, which is about sports. Our new show, The Game Within, is on the Valor Media Network. It's an addition to this show. It streams live at 3:30 Central on Tuesdays. We've done 2 episodes of it so far. It tends to drop on audio on Tuesday evenings or on Wednesday mornings, and folks can go check it out. I'm sure we'll put a link to it in the show notes here and in the YouTube comments. But we've done 2 shows. It's you, me, and our friend Adisu Demisi. And it's us taking our 3 political and business backgrounds to the world of sports. So it's not just a straight up sports podcast. It is looking at the politics and the business of sports and how it affects what happens on the field, on the court, but also how sports in the larger way also just affect our culture. And basically our argument is that, there's more to sports than we see, and it's a fun, not too serious look at all the parts about sports that don't necessarily happen on the field.
Absolutely. And if folks want to hear just our post Super Bowl commentary, which we normally put here, you can listen to that episode. And we've been dropping some of the episodes here on the feed, the first 2 episodes, but we have a new feed that you could also subscribe to, and it would help us if you did at the Game Within. And if you like the episodes, go there and do a review and a 5-star, because that helps us out, because we're new there. We're building up something new there. And at a certain point, for those of you who, you know, aren't that interested in sports, we'll wind up posting everything specifically to that feed. We just wanted to give you an opportunity to hear some of the first few episodes.
Yeah, and when you make your review, like, let us know which parts you like and what you don't like. We're trying a few different things. It's a new show, and your input would be very helpful. But again, go to the Game Within feed, subscribe. This is on audio. Go to the and on YouTube. Go to the Game Within feed, subscribe, and let us know what you think. So, thanks everybody. All right, you want to do one for us? You're about to finally head back to New York.
Yeah, I've been in California for just a little while, playing tennis and catching up on stuff, and heading back to New York for a couple of days to just take care of some life stuff before I head to New Orleans. New Orleans is gonna be my home base for a couple of months, because I'm working on a narrative podcast series about the 20th anniversary of Katrina. So basically,
that's cool.
Grabbing some stuff, heading to New York in a couple of days, grab my stuff, and then head down to New Orleans, which is a city I love. And I'm gonna try to make sense of what has happened in the past 20 years since Katrina
That
hit
feels
within
like
that
yesterday.
education system. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I have a ridiculous thing that's funny that I've been involved with here lately. As people I think know, and if they don't know, I'll tell them. You alluded to it earlier that my truck, which I love very much, 3 weeks ago, very surprisingly in our front yard, caught on fire and
just out of nowhere, right? Like
yeah.
There's no easy
Something happened in the engine, either having to do with the cold or rodents or I don't know what, but I went to turn it on, it caught on fire, burned to the ground. I've been dealing with auto insurance and all that stuff, and I aim to replace it. It's kind of an irreplaceable truck. It was a used truck, but it's irreplaceable for all sorts of reasons, including sentimental. But so I got a truck same year, 2018, and there's improvements I want to make to it to make it like the old truck. But one of the things that will happen when I do that, if I end up doing that, is that it'd be a little bit taller, and it would not necessarily fit in my garage. And so I've been going through like what to do about that. Diana and I have been discussing it, and without getting into it that much, the funny thing is that, you know, Diana travels a lot for her work. She's gone right now, but she was gone last week. And while she was gone, I created a PowerPoint presentation for my wife using, and as you know, my wife is a keynote speaker and author and consultant on the subject of business innovation and curiosity. And she has all sorts of methodologies that are unique to her that people love. And
did you throw her methodology back in her face?
100%. It was, I used a few of them. Now I didn't, as she told me afterwards, I didn't employ all of them 100% correctly, but the slides were hilarious, and they all, you know, came up with an argument as to how I think we should approach this situation. And I can't say that it worked because the discussion is still ongoing, but I do think she found it adorable. And I do think it sort of loosened the jar on the argument a little bit. And so it has made our conversations about what to do a little more fruitful. And that's been hilarious. So anyway,
love that.
Good old PowerPoint presentation in the marriage. Not something I've hauled out before, but
well, I'm rooting for you, and we got to solve whatever this rodent problem is. I know we talked about this a long time ago, and it's like maybe get one of those sound emitters. I think that was my recommendation last time, because I had
before,
issues.
And I'll tell you what my solution is now is when we finish this in about 30 seconds, I'm heading downstairs to start cleaning out the basement so that I can start moving stuff from the garage so that both vehicles will just fit in the garage. Because I seem to have the relationship to the squirrels in my neighborhood that the family from Jaws has in the Jaws movies to the shark, and to the beaver. Is it to the
gopher or something?
To the gophers, yeah. So at this point, if that's what it was, they win. Cool. I'm moving all the vehicles inside, but I got a lot of work to do around here to make room. So anyway, all right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. This was fun. Please leave a 5-star review here, but also go over to The Game Within, give it a listen, and leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. You can find me at Jason Kander on all the stuff, and Ravi at Ravi and Gupta on all the stuff. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.